Hey, good afternoon or evening or morning, wherever you're joining us today. So excited to be here. My name is Jared Blank. Want to give a special shout out to the International Dyslexia Association Oregon branch for hosting this conversation. And I want to introduce you to Miguel. Miguel and I have run races together. He's been there from the very beginning, documenting the journey of a lot of my running projects that I've done. In support of the International Dyslexia Association and raising awareness around dyslexia. And Miguel, thank you for all your work and welcome today. Thanks for joining the conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jared. Yeah, and thank you for the introduction. Yeah, as Jared said, that we've been working together for a few years now, and the major thing that brought Jared and I together was our love of running. And we met at a really interesting time because I had just left my job and I wanted to pursue a career in video production. And Jared just one of my friends connected us, and I was like, wow, I love your story. We've really got to find some sort of way to tell it. And because I found it so inspiring, we've gone on many runs together, shared many miles and many stories, and we're very excited to share a lot of some of that conversation with you all.
Yeah, I mean, I can even go back to when we first met each other. I was getting ready for the San Francisco Ultra race, and that was like our first time like meeting each other, and you were filming and documenting this race running around the city of San Francisco, which was an amazing time. But I think something that came about and something that you were kind of leading into was, I think during that same week when we were just having a conversation, after putting video, after you put video together, you were like, you really need to tell this story and write a book. And I think you kind of challenged me at that moment, in a way that no one else had challenged me before on that subject line. So, and here we are, in 2023, and there's been a book, and you've done a number of videos showcasing this. So your work is really like, I think, extended beyond what I even thought was imaginable at the time.
And what I think is the most beautiful part of us getting a chance to meet each other is the fact that when we first met, no one really knew that you had dyslexia. And for a lot of people, just like yourself, they tend not to lead with that, right? And when you first told me, and when I was being introduced to you, I was told that, yeah, there's this really awesome guy who's going to run 7 marathons in 7 days in 7 different continents. And he's quitting his job. And that in itself, obviously, is inspiring. But when you told me, Miguel, this is so much more than just about running, I want you to know that I've never told my story before. And full disclosure, this is going to be one of the toughest challenges that I've ever had to do, much more than just running. I'm curious, Jared, for you, when I first told you this story needs to be told, you should probably write a book one day. What thoughts were going through your mind during that time? And this was all at a time that you were gearing up for some pretty big races. So obviously, that's a lot on your plate. That's a lot for anybody to prepare for these types of races, but also write a book, all the while growing up and facing learning challenges. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I'm trying to think back to that because there's so many different aspects of this question, right? Like you're training for races that you've never run. You're training to run as further than you've ever run in your entire life. And then you're also like getting ready to talk about a story very publicly that hadn't really been shared, or maybe been unshared with only a few close people. And I think it's like easy to kind of look back and say, oh, we should have been doing this all along. like I had a responsibility to do it all along. Um, and I feel like there's a couple parts to that because I look at my community and how many people are challenged with dyslexia or how many people are challenged with learning challenges. And what I'm realizing through this whole experience is uh, how fortunate and privileged I was to have resources available to me, even though it was really hard and I was struggling. There's so many members of my community that have it so much worse because they don't have that access. And I think part of this is like kind of wishing I'd done it earlier and thought about my community in a different way, even just growing up from this whole experience. But now, you kind of have to hit the ball where it lies. And knowing that, I think how important it is that these stories get told and that they get told to not only people that are in education, not only people that are students of dyslexia, or students that have a dyslexia or experiencing dyslexia, but it's so important to branch it out to community members so that they can understand, because that's the only way this changes. The conversation can happen amongst people that are dyslexic or people that are involved in education, but only real change will come from the outside, from other people understanding that. And I think something being around you and the importance of storytelling is something that I really took away from that. But I think probably very overwhelmed at first to answer your question, and then understanding the responsibility that lies within it.
And you definitely took it in stride, because when I still distinctly remember sitting in your kitchen, basically saying these words, Jared, this has got to become a book one day. And with those words, I knew that there was like this burning desire to really make it happen. And I don't think there are many people that I've encountered that can really take on, or that I've seen take on a challenge like you have, whether it is writing a book or running races all around the world, or running from Nevada to California, or running 100 miles. But what you've shown me is that all of these things are possible, right? That was probably one of the most inspiring things for me in getting to know you, is that all of these things are possible. And I think that's a very powerful thing to share, and that has been continuously shared because you started sharing your story. I've honestly seen you go from not being that active on social media to speaking in front of very large audiences and traveling to do that. So, kind of switching gears a little bit, a big one of your missions in life is to fuse running and dyslexia. What does that mean to you, particularly within the education space? What is the biggest thing that you would want to share with regards to fusing running and movement in general and dyslexia?
Well, I really appreciate this question. And if we look at dyslexia as an umbrella, right? So we know dyslexia can affect one's reading ability and handwriting. It can also affect how we look at math. And there's actually a name for it. They call it dyscalculia. It can actually affect motor and sensory control. They call that dyspraxia. So there's kind of this umbrella term dyslexia, but there can be a lot of different elements to it. I think as you're looking at fusing dyslexia and running, it's important to understand that there is this broad, there's this umbrella term dyslexia, but how it can affect the way we move, how it can affect the way we have hand-eye coordination. And why I say that is because I really believe in the power movement. I think all humans, on some level can find ways to move in their own unique way, and how important that is, right? To just our health and wellness and our well-being. But, so running allowed me to like get out the door and deal with the frustration of school life and learning. So there is that important element to it. But then there's also like the challenges with running. Like I talk about all the time, my gait and coordination is still not there. I'm working on that constantly to improving that. And I want that knowledge out there as well, because there are students that are super passionate about sports and wanting to be in sports. And if they can learn these fine movements, if coaches can understand, like, oh, I actually need to just like teach them the art of like moving from A to B, they can get it and they can actually be really productive athletes. They can be, enjoy the experience of movement a lot better. And so I think when I look at fusing it, dyslexia and running, it's hitting all of those facets.
That's awesome. That's awesome. For you in particular, I mean, think back to when you were young Jared and you were very involved in sports. You played multiple sports. How did those activities help you particularly? Um, Obviously, there are benefits beyond, uh, just within one facet. For me, being an athlete, pretty much my whole entire life, you know, for as long as I can remember, I've been running since I was in middle school. Um, what sorts of things did sport do for you personally when you were growing up with learning challenges?
Um, I think it gave me a break in the day from the academics for sure. So like being able to go run outside or have a soccer practice broke up the day. Like my I show us I when I'm speaking, I usually show a snapshot of my schedule, but it was something to the extent of getting up in the morning and practice spelling with my mom, going to school, you know, going to occupational therapy when I was in elementary school, going back to school. Um, and then if I had a practice or something, some sort of activity, whether it's soccer or something that was different than school, because I had tutoring at night. So it was always school on top of school. And so it really gave me a break. It really gave me a chance to breathe from the day-to-day grind of school.
Did you ever find yourself practicing either spelling or reading at the same time as doing certain physical activities?
I think that was all of elementary school. Like I would always learn by having like a ball in my hand of some sort, or like bouncing a basketball or walking around. And I still probably do that on some level, just like there's an element of like movement and connection. And then one of the jokes I say is like I have a party trick where if we were all sitting at a table and everyone were to go around and talk about a problem, I could probably go out for a run and after hearing everybody come back with the solution to like what we were trying to solve, just because that's out the door.
Yeah, that's great. That is great. So another question I have for you is pertaining to your running specifically. So are there times where, because here's the thing, when you think about uh, star athletes or people who are exceptionally great at what they do, whether you're Michael Jordan or Michael Johnson, uh, we don't really focus on what they thought about when they felt like quitting. If they ever got to a certain point where they thought that they couldn't do it. I remember having a conversation with you after, well, it might have been during your 100-mile race. And when we reconnected at right around mile 80, so that I could kind of help you get to the finish line. And when I was crewing with you, what are the times that you can distinctly remember of thinking to yourself, okay, I don't think I can do this, or I don't think I'll be able to finish this 100-mile race? And what goes on in your mind to rewire something to get you through it?
That's a great question. Thinking about that race in particular, I remember coming around the 50-mile mark. So that course is two 50-mile laps. So when you come around the first lap, you have people that are just there doing the 50-miler, So a lot of people are finishing for the day or have finished and they're just kind of done. So you're kind of like, you're kind of you know that you're doing another lap, which is a challenge in itself. But I remember coming around that 50 and I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna keep going. And normally, like, I think you would take a little bit more time in that aid station to like get set. And I just knew I had to keep going because the way it worked was like once I was 3 miles down the road, I'm like, I've already started the loop. So like going back doesn't make sense. And it was kind of that push of like, if I can just keep going a little bit further, I'll get closer to the other side of like needing to finish the loop than I will be turning back or stopping.
Oh wow. Yeah, I do remember seeing you at the 50-mile mark, and it looked like, man, yeah, you were in some pain. I definitely remember that.
Yeah, it was super painful. Like I really didn't know how I was going to get that done. And then slowly but surely, it was kind of like, oh, 3 miles, 5 miles down the road, next aid station, next aid station.
80 miles. You get to run with Miguel the last 20
Well,
miles.
80 miles and the sun's up and it's a totally different day and new life, right? And there is something to that. Like it's hard to give people advice in those situations because every situation is different and everyone's an individual in the sport and you have to make the best decisions you can as an individual. But I do tell people something that I experienced was running through the night. As soon as that first light starts to hit, you do feel a sense of like waking up again, even if you have been moving all night. And that was definitely the case. I mean, that was my first one. So
Wow. Now, switching that gear over to dyslexia, does that sometimes feel like thinking back to when you're growing up, and sometimes even till now when you encounter um, just some of these types of challenges, does that sometimes feel like a marathon? I remember you mentioning to me, even when you were recently writing your book and even doing the audiobook, which was your voice, by the way, how much of that feels like the same level of challenge for you? And did you reach that point of feeling like, oh, wow, the sun's coming up again? This feels like a new day. Here's a second wind, third wind, fourth wind.
well, I think kind of taking your question apart, like anytime I'm reading out loud, that's going to be the hardest thing one of the hardest things I do. And so for that book, I had to, because the way we were recording it, we needed to read it all in one day. And that was a grind, an ultra marathon in itself, maybe two of them together for me. So like there's that element of it. And I think something that like plays into running as you were talking, I was thinking back, sometimes I've been out in a race or in a hard spot and I'll be like, well, at least I'm not in a classroom right now. And that always helps me finish because like you described it as a marathon, but the classroom for a dyslexic student can be the worst ultra race with weather conditions and mountainous terrain, and it can feel like the most defeating environment that you're in. So there's a statistic where 70% of all successful dyslexic had somebody in their corner. And I feel like I represent one of those 70% because of the amount of people that were in my corner pushing me through. Had I not had that or any of those resources, again, this is why it's so important because we can solve some of these issues by having the right instruction. International Dyslexia Association constantly is teaching teachers. And when you bring in, you know, proven scientific reading to the classroom, and it's implemented for those kids that are K through third grade, everyone, I mean, it will help anyone that is capable of learning to read. That tool will help, so that's why it's so important. It's because right now 10 to 20% is getting neglected. That closes that gap significantly. And then there's other strategies that you can do to make sure that you're serving the rest of the students that maybe need a little bit more intensive training after that. But that could help change it to maybe not being an ultra marathon under the worst conditions, but maybe it becomes a half marathon or a marathon.
I see. Yeah. So you would suggest having the proper support in order to kind of build your crew, so to speak, for with individuals that are going through learning challenges.
Yeah, if we were going to play it to an ultra race,
yeah,
I think if you were to do scientific based reading programs K through third grade for everyone across the board, it's like telling kids they're going to run through the night, but you're giving them a backpack, a headlamp, you're giving them fuel, and you're giving them hydration to get through when you do that. If you don't do that and you just teach them by like thinking they're just going to be able to pick up a book and read,
yeah,
it's giving the dyslexic students and students with learning challenges maybe a pack of pretzels and a juice box and telling them good luck.
So here's also my question too, and I'm about to get real with you, Jared. This might take you to back when you were a kid, because I mean we've all been kids before, and as I was growing up, I struggled with taking standardized tests, and I always got really nervous because I started seeing everybody finishing their tests quicker than me. Now, obviously, there are certain programs that allow for extended testing time, and other resources for kids that are experiencing learning challenges. However, some people haven't been able to muster up the courage to seek out that help, right? And there have been times when I was, a stubborn runner and saying, I don't need to stop at the water station in my race. I'm tough, or I don't need the help. All the cool kids can do it all on their own. I don't need someone to help me. And I'm sure you'd agree that is the case for a lot of kids, because they want to feel like all of the other kids. What would you have to say to like kids and young adults that don't necessarily feel the need that they need that support, or fear that it might not look as cool if they wear a headlamp to run in the dark?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And again, I think this becomes very individualized because everyone's going to experience that on a different level. And I can relate to that. I mean, I'm somebody that at times took accommodations, and that sometimes I had that stubborn mentality of I just need to push through and I want to be like everyone else. I think though, I kind of put the onus on adults first. Adults have a responsibility to set up the game in the playing field. What I mean by that is if you make assistive technology, apps or devices, or whether it's the computer, available to everybody, where everyone can choose what tools are best for them, then it doesn't become a thing. And then it's not, oh, so and so has a headlamp. Then it becomes kind of what an aid station looks like. You lay out all the food, and you lay out, any supplies somebody might need, and they can go through and be like, pick and choose. And I think and that's where I'm like, this is where universal education is so important, because it's like, okay, we've talked about the science of reading. if you add assistive technology and just make it available to any student, regardless of like not even needing a IEP, which is like an individualized education plan, or needing paperwork, does two things. One, okay, if it's available to everybody, use whatever you want. So it eliminates the fear of like being judged for using an iPad or something that helps you learn better. The other thing it does is if you think about a single parent household who's trying to work to put food on the table, now they're no longer having to go get a lawyer, go fight school board for this, and this because their student needs it. They can kind of like allow the game to like actually be a fair game for everyone. And I say the same thing for like, tests that would have an impact on someone's next level, whether they're going from, high school to college or a professional type test. If you make that extended time for anyone that needs it, the students that need it will take it and do better because of it. People that don't need extra time aren't going to take extra time. It's kind of like a marathon course. If you set the stage at 8 hours and it takes someone 2 hours to run it, they're going to run it in 2 hours. And if it takes somebody 6 hours to run it, they're going to take 6 hours. But at the end of the day, those two people have accomplished something within their own framework. And I think that's the model that we need to look at when we're looking at how we build a system that eliminates that what you were talking about.
Honestly, that is so powerful. And I think that had that been available to me when I was in elementary school in the 90s, that would have been a game changer because it kind of shifts the whole narrative around, all right, well, all the smartest kids have the upper hand because they have all of the testing is conducive for their way of learning. And I didn't realize until later on in life is that I was so much I learned far different than anybody else did. I realized that I was much more of a hands-on learner, like in college. Honestly, I didn't have like the best test scores, nor did I graduate at the top of my class in high school. And I was like, what's wrong with me? Like, why why does the learning have to be like stuck within this box? And I love the way that you compared it to having running a marathon. Everyone still accomplishes something within that 8 hour time frame because they're all working towards completing a marathon, and they do it in their own way, but at the end of the day they're still accomplishing the completion of the marathon. So that's something. And I really appreciate your answer there because that's something that I've always talked about. I thought about what types of schools my future children are going to be, what they're going to be experiencing. And I imagine that the school will provide all of the students with an iPad and having the option to switch everything to the dyslexia font if they need it. Just like how the water station and aid stations are available to you, you can choose to use them or not. It really just depends on where you understand that you are at. So I think that's really powerful, and I would love to see I would love to see schools adopting that much more than they are today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Right. I mean, I think it helps people on such a it makes their jobs easier. I think it makes teachers' jobs easier. I think it makes the students' jobs easier. And when you do that, then I think you'll have more success or more achievements within the education system in itself. And so I'm hoping for the same thing.
So switching gears a little bit here, tell us about the race that you're gearing up for next.
Yeah. So, well, to take you back just a few weeks ago, I was part of a team that ran from Santa Monica Pier to Las Vegas. And we had done that in 2022. So we were able to PR by 4 hours, which was quite an accomplishment. So that was kind of the first race of my season. But Next up is London. The London Marathon I'll be running for the British Dyslexia Association. Again, just another opportunity to raise awareness and funds for a great organization that is really trying to change how the world sees dyslexics, I think. So excited about that opportunity.
Amazing. When's the race?
So that race will be on April 23rd, Sunday, April 23rd, I believe.
Nice. Nice. So I'm really curious, and I've almost made it part of my life's mission, and it's stemmed from us meeting for the first time to help people share their stories to create positive change in the world. What would you say, kind of like, I guess now we're looking at almost knowing each other for 6 years and working together. What would you say to somebody that maybe struggling with telling their story and really even just being open about the learning challenges that they experience? I guess putting yourself in the shoe of the Jared that might have a bit of apprehension to get in front of the camera and be very vulnerable and tell the world about their story. What would you tell somebody that's experiencing that? Somebody that was in your shoes maybe in 2016?
Yeah, I'd say the first thing is I would tell them to give themselves some grace because I think you you tell your story when you're ready to tell it. And so if you're not feeling ready, it's okay. You know what I mean? I think I would start there, but I'd also kind of tell them to be proud of their story. Like, especially if there's someone that's coming from dealing with dyslexia or dealing with the learning challenge, because there's so much good stuff in there. There's so many strengths that come with but it's hard to get to those strengths when you are in the middle of it. And so it's kind of a fine line because you don't want to I wouldn't tell somebody to like force it, but I would tell them to maybe just observe their feelings around their story and write down ideas, positive, negative, and different, and just try to keep documenting it until they feel like they have it in a place that they are ready to share it.
What's really cool about the world that we live in now is that everyone has the tools to be a storyteller, right? And particularly the younger generation, just because there are a lot of great storytellers who are telling great stories from their phones that are being very vulnerable. And I do give a lot of credit to Gen Z because a lot of Gen Z wants to be in front of the camera.
Oh yeah,
And
you're seeing it all the time.
yeah, and it's a really cool transformation that I'm seeing, and I'm trying to imagine like what a Gen Z Jared would look like. So if you had grown up in this, like if you were in middle school and high school around this time, what things would be like, and perhaps you may have found yourself sharing your story a bit sooner than in your middle 30s. But I really do think that it's never too late to start. Um, if your story is any indication that there's obviously been a lot of change and a lot of people inspired through your story, even in the time that you had just started in your mid 30s. So I do have a question, kind of bouncing off of that, is that you obviously didn't do this all on your own,
Mm-mm.
right? You had,
No.
and you say this time and time again, that you had people, really great people in your corner. And for anybody that's read your book, the whole book is literally like you and your challenges and the people that you had in your corner. And that's one of the key themes that I took away from reading it was, wow, there is always somebody that is there to help in every facet of life. However, the toughest thing is to ask for help. And beyond just, having the headlamp, having the water, stopping at an aid station, When it comes to people and asking other people for help, that's a bit more complex. And most people tend to not do it. Most people will try to see what they can do all on their own first, wait till they fail or wait till they're hurt before asking for help. What
I
sort of
can self included.
yeah, and so what goes on through your mind in those times where you're like, should I ask Miguel for help here, or should I just try it on my own first? What sort of advice would you give to people in general, whether that's people who are just getting started with their running, or people that are struggling with their learning challenges and don't know where to ask for the proper help, and maybe have not been able to express the fact that they may have learning challenges? Because there's a population of people that don't know that they do.
Yeah.
So I know this is kind of like a question with multiple layers, but really I think the main theme here is it's key to ask for help, but it's really hard to ask for help. But how do you start asking for help?
Yeah, I think it's something I've definitely struggled with, and like have had to learn, and learning both on the hard ways as well as what happens when you do ask for help. But I think something that has helped me is getting self-aware of what is it that I'm needing. Like what is it? Where am I struggling? And where am I trying to go? And you know, being okay asking somebody for help that might not be the right person to start with, but it gives you a starting point. Like sometimes you don't know who to ask. But if you just, I found when I just hold on to that, it doesn't usually help me just to keep, you know, pushing against the wall. it it has helped me to start to investigate and okay, here's what I need to solve and who can help me solve it. And maybe I don't even know who that first person is, but I'm gonna call Miguel and see if he has an idea. I'm gonna call so and so and see what they would do in this situation just to get started. I think picking up the phone, I know it's not the easiest thing and it's kind of old school, I guess, technology now, but like picking up the phone and calling somebody and starting is like it's like taking that step down the road. It's not necessarily going to lead to like the end goal right away, but it gets you on a path, is what I've found. So that's what I would just tell somebody is like start and be okay to, it might not be the first person. You might have to call two or three people in order to like get where you're going, but you never know who has an idea or who can connect you to a resource that could make your job easier. I always look at like leadership is like making somebody else's job easier.
Yeah.
And so I think when I look at, and why I'm so grateful for you is if anyone gets to work with you, they know that you bring out their story in just such a genuine way. Um, and there's such an art to it and to the work you do. So I so appreciate you on that level. And I just think that like you just gotta start. You just gotta be willing to like put yourself out there.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that you're a person that is a fantastic example of that. Is that I didn't really sense much fear on your end about putting yourself out there, which made you such a great joy to work with as a filmmaker who aspires to film the next great documentary. That is a very important skill to develop. That is, being vulnerable is such an important thing to have, and I think it's easier said than done, obviously.
Totally. I think the other thing that's helped me, and as you were talking, I kind of realized this too, is the responsibility that I was seeing. I hadn't seen changes since being in the education system for 30 years. it was 30 years before we hadn't seen not much has changed. They just started being able to use the term dyslexia in the state of Oregon. I think
Wait, I did not know that.
yeah, it was so, or at least in Portland Public Schools. And I think again, going back, like when you feel a responsibility to your community, allows me to like become more vulnerable or tell the story in a way that people can connect to it.
Yeah, totally, totally. Wow, man, really just thinking about how far you have come throughout this process. I'm really interested to see, have you come across in your I guess traveling all over to speak, and I'm sure people have reached out to you in over Instagram, and anyone that you've spoken with. Uh, have there been some other stories that have inspired you that you've come across in your time? Because here's the thing: it's very contagious, right? You've made yourself vulnerable, so everyone around you feels more comfortable to share their story because it's like, huh, wow, I kind of saw a little bit of myself in your story, in me as a speaking as in me, but also people that also listen to you speak. I'm sure they'd come up to you and said, wow, Jared, like I was so moved by your story because I experienced a lot of the same things that you've experienced. Have there been some stories that you've come across that are like, wow, that's inspiring, and it's also feel like further fueling me and fueling your mission to really kind of spread this vibe of, it's okay, it's it's a more of a superpower that you have dyslexia. I'm very curious. Have there been some stories that have been shared with you that have really continued to fuel your fire?
Yeah, I think so many actually. Like I was as you're asking the question, I was like, kind of going through, and I think there's a couple of examples that like stand out. I remember meeting with a student who was, I think, 7 or 8 at the time, who was already experiencing anxiety because they weren't being supported in the classroom, and then getting to see them start to get that support and following their story, like just the transformation that they've gone from like being anxious, not wanting to go to school, to like going to class and being an active participant. That's super inspiring. And you see that at a young age. And then we have the Professional Dyslexia Network through the Oregon branch. So we have adults meet on a monthly call, hearing their stories. I mean, what their challenges, be it through work or just the array of talent that we have, whether somebody's sharing their artwork or someone sharing something that they did, or, you know, all of that has meaning and impact. I think it definitely inspires me. And then I think some of the cool things that I've seen in going around to some of the schools that I've been able to visit is you watch these lessons being taught to students and the engagement and just the way that they're participating. I mean, that's inspiring. So you know that there's answers out there. You know that there are success stories out there, and seeing people kind of from young to adult and everything in between, I think those are really inspiring for me to like keep pushing and keep wanting to see change, because the ultimate goal would be that we'd have more of those.
Yeah.
We look at the way we're set up now, we're not going to get a lot, we're not getting, we're not hitting 70 to 90%. We're hitting maybe barely 50%. And, I always say you're going to get taxed on the front end or the back end. If we, you know, don't change the way we teach up front, school to prison pipeline is real. Students with learning challenges, dyslexia, more likely to be in poverty. So it's a lot harder, I think, and a lot more costly to deal with things on the back end than it is to start getting ahead of it, putting out people that, you know, are more involved in our systems, that are more able to participate. That's going to be more of a productive society than the way we're set up right now.
I always think about that with the way that we're set up right now, and kind of the world that I grew up with was you were rewarded for getting the highest scores. And I remember in my biology class, our our teacher put up everybody's names that had the highest scores on our tests and quizzes. And while yes, like it's great to kind of stir up a competitive spirit, and by all means I'm extremely competitive, I don't necessarily think that that is the best way to quantify one's success. So when you had mentioned, I was picking out words from your response just then, and I was thinking success. I wonder how Jared measures success. And I follow. I'm a very avid follower of the Nike Run Club, as you know, and the global head coach of the Nike Run Club, Coach Bennett, always says, measure success as many ways as you can. And I think that's a very powerful statement for runners in general, because it's not about having the fastest times. It's not it's not about running the most miles. It's not about really the numbers at all. I think everybody has their own way of measuring their own successes. And I think for education, how can education apply that same level of thinking where it's not about getting the highest test scores on your biology exams and getting the recognition for getting the highest scores? While yes, it takes a lot of hard work and dedication in order to do that. However, in the way that education is structured right now, and the way that people are expected to score certain scores in order to get in certain schools, do you think that there could be a fundamental shift in how success is quantified for students in general, and really people as they're kind of framing their own definitions of success?
Well, the short answer is yes. But I'm guessing you want me to elaborate a little bit.
Yeah.
First, I want to say Coach Bennett is awesome. I get a lot of inspiration from Coach Bennett as well, so I appreciate him and a lot of the things that he does talk about. And I like the concept of measuring success in a number of different ways. And I understand. Look, you're gonna have runners that are podium runners, right? They're gonna be the close to 2 hour marathon runners, and there's a space for them, and that should be very much celebrated. But similarly, it's like the person that still finishes in 6 hours or whatever, they've still run a marathon, right? And while they may not be a podium medaled runner, there is a place for that success to be celebrated and for them to be actively participating. So if you look at the school setup, and I talk to teachers and educators about this concept, there's absolutely a place for somebody who takes a standardized test and nails it, for them to move on and continue to achieve at a high level. What I would also challenge, though, is I'm not saying you need to give someone an A for doing this, But if they were to take a student who was maybe not showcasing what they knew on a written exam and provide oral questions to them about subject matter and let them talk it out, or let them show you what they know in a video or a PowerPoint presentation or in some other matter that's not simply just true and false or multiple choice, that can keep them participating in the classroom. And maybe that doesn't equate to an A, but maybe it shows you that they're showing up and taking part, and then being able to demonstrate working knowledge of material. I go back to an oceanography class that I had, and I think this is an important example. The teacher of the oceanography class told us this story. She goes, I had a C student who loved oceanography, loved it with a passion, got a C on all of the tests. But when it was time for the end of the year project where they went and collected samples and built their own aquariums, all the students' animals died except for that one student that was getting C's. So I take that as like, that's somebody that took information and applied it in a totally, feasible way that we can measure success, right? Like, if there isn't a clear definition. So I think to your question, and I know this is a little bit long, we need more opportunity for people to showcase what they know if we want them to keep showing up. It is literally crazy for a dyslexic student or a student with learning challenges that isn't being given the tools to participate to continue to show up to the classroom. So when you do get those, and then we talk about grit and resilience, it's kind of misleading in the sense like, yeah, they stayed within it and they fought really, really hard, but it would be so much different, right? If you had and I used to use the example in running, if you had the right running shoes and you had the right gym workout and you go to the gym at 5:30 and you do your exercises and then you do your stretches and then you go to practice, that is efficient use of your time with the right guardrails to get you to where you want to go. It's another thing if you show up to the track and you don't really have running shoes and you keep getting blisters and you stay out there, but like you're not really able to improve because you don't have the right tools. It shows grit and effort, but we're not really helping them develop. And
Right.
that is where I would love to see the change.
Wow. Yeah, you more than answered my question. Thank you, Jared. That was awesome. That was awesome. But yeah, I think we've got 2 minutes left in our short little interview, fireside chat. Do you have anything else that you wanted to add, or any closing remarks that you wanted to share that we might not have touched on this in this conversation?
I feel like we hit so many different things. I appreciate you asking such great questions and doing this fireside chat and raising awareness around dyslexia, and IDA Oregon hosting this. And yeah, follow along in the journey to London, and there's still opportunity to donate and support that endeavor, and just appreciate everyone's time.